Hey everyone, welcome to our first slideshow on ancient Rome. Today's topic is going to be the beginnings of Rome. So, even though legend has it that Romulus is going to be credited with creating Rome, in reality, it's going to start because of its location. So, what exactly makes Rome a desirable location? It was built on 7 hills. It's near the Tiber River. It was in the center of Italy, and it was near the Mediterranean Sea. From the years 1000 to 500 BC, there were 3 groups living in Italy. There were the Latins, the Greeks, and the Etruscans. Eventually, those 3 groups are going to fight for power. The Latins are going to settle on both sides of the Tiber River in a region known as Latium. This was the original settlement of Rome. Therefore, the Latins are considered the first Romans. They lived in wooden huts atop Palatine Hill, which was one of the 7 hills that Rome was built on. From 750 to 600 BC, Greece established 50 colonies in Italy. They brought Greeks and Romans together and shared ideas. An example of this is that the Greeks taught Romans how to grow grapes and olives. The Etruscans were from northern Italy up in the mountains. They were known for their metalwork and their engineering. And the Romans are going to adopt the Etruscans' alphabet, and they're going to also use their arches in their architecture. The Etruscans dug tunnels and built dams to drain their fields. They built their cities high on hills and surrounded them with a wall. They were also feared as pirates, not the traditional pirates that we think of like Pirates of the Caribbean, but basically they would just go ransack a city, take whatever they wanted, and leave. The Etruscans mined for copper, iron, and other metals, and then metal workers would turn those into tools. The Etruscans had a strong army that used a phalanx formation from Greece, but their best weapon was actually their shoes. Now, did they actually use their shoes as a weapon? No, they weren't going to take it off their foot and hit people with it. But because they lived up in the mountains, you can imagine what it's like walking up like a mountainous region with lots of sharp edges, rocks, things like that. Most soldiers at this time are not going to have shoes, which means their bare feet are going to be walking on that uneven, rough terrain. The Etruscans are going to have shoes, which is going to allow them to maneuver much, much easier in that terrain. The Etruscans played games similar to chess. They loved wrestling, running, boxing, and horse racing. And they also loved music and dancing. Dancing was done to please the gods, and women were also allowed to dance. Unlike Latin women, Etruscans could dance, they could own property, and they could take part in celebrations. Again, to us, that seems like nothing, but compared to a lot of other women at that time, it was quite a bit of freedom. The Etruscans were polytheistic. They used many of the Greek gods, they just gave them new names. So, for example, Zeus and Jupiter are the same god. Zeus is just the name for the Greeks. Jupiter is the name for the Romans. They believed that the universe was divided into provinces. The Etruscans believed they lived in the center of the universe. To the south were the gods of nature and earth. To the west were the gods of death. And to the east were the gods of the heavens. So they built their cities facing east. When a noble would die, 2 of his slaves would fight to the death, and then the spirit of the killed slave went with the spirit of the noble to serve him in his afterlife. So if you were a slave during your lifetime, it is believed that you were going to continue to be a slave even in your afterlife. The dead would then be buried in underground tombs called catacombs. And I have a couple pictures here of some catacombs. They're a little blurry, but you can get the idea. Basically, it's underground, and there's these like individual slots for the bodies to be buried in. The cool thing about some of these catacombs in Italy and in France is that they still exist today. So there are actual tours and things like that where you can go down and take a look at some of these catacombs. That is it for the presentation on the beginnings of Rome.